Hello and welcome to the first panel session on day 3 of Intelligent Transport's Transport Innovation Summit 2022. My name is Leah Hockley. I'm the editor of Intelligent Transport and I'll be supporting this session today. Joining me for this discussion is Shenzhen Bus Group's Hallie Liao, Matthias Jangel from Budapest Transport and Gary Birmingham of First Bus, who are here to discuss the progress that the industry is making in relation to the adoption of alternative power and what is set to come next. The role of moderator for this session will be placed in the capable hands of Arndt Batzner, a member of the Board of Directors at Mobility Car Sharing Switzerland. Don't forget that Hallie, Matthias and Gary will all be answering your questions throughout the discussion today, so make sure to use the live discussion button at the bottom right hand of your screen to submit your questions, and the speakers will do their best to get through them. For now, I would like to hand over to Arndt as the moderator of our session today.
Yes, good morning. Thanks a lot, Leah, for the kind introduction, and it's good to welcome you on the third day to session number 9, dealing with decarbonisation through the adoption of alternative power in public transport, which obviously is a very big topic in the wake of COP26 and as concerns for our climate increase. So no time is better than now to be making the change away from fossil-based fuels, diesel and petrol, to more sustainably powered vehicles. And I'm looking very much forward with our 3 experts to discuss the progress that the industry is making, the approaches that they chose, their experiences and best practices, and also what comes next. Is the reliance on electric mobility to decarbonize public transportation going to be enough? Is it battery electric versus hydrogen cell versus opportunity charging versus overhead wires? Are budget constraints and funding issues creating too big of a barrier for alternative power adoption? How do we deal with the financing of infrastructure? So it's a huge topic. It's of highest actuality globally, and as best practices are emerging, I'm most happy to welcome Gary Birmingham, who's the program director, decarbonisation delivery from First Bus, Hallie Liao, who's the head of international development at Shenzhen Bus Group, and Matthias Jangel, who's the chief strategy officer of Budapest Transportation Company, BKV. So welcome to that, and I'll encourage the audience to submit questions actively. After the 3 presentations we'll be hearing, we'll have ample room to discuss the critical points and whatever you would like to know from our experts. So why don't we start off, Gary? The floor is yours.
Thanks, Arndt. Just share my screen. Okay. Fantastic. So good morning, everyone. So yes, as introduced, I'm Gary Birmingham. I'm the director of decarbonisation delivery here at First Bus in the UK. Just a little background. So First Bus and zero emissions. So for those who don't know, First Bus are one of the largest bus operators in the UK. We serve 40 of the largest UK's towns and cities. We have a current fleet size of just over 5,000 vehicles, over 64 operating depots, which are shown on the map of the United Kingdom to the right-hand side. Our big picture, so back just before the height of the pandemic, our CEO at the time announced that we will only operate a 100% zero emission bus fleet by 2035, and we would not order no new diesel buses after this year, so December 22. So when we have dipped our toe in this water before, so at that point, and at the start of 2021, we actually had 65 zero emission buses, and we purchased them in a piecemeal solution, a few here, a few there. And at the time, our technology direction was quite uncertain, really, for everything from infrastructure, how we charged, the pantograph, AC, DC, opportunity, etc. And obviously hydrogen vehicles. So I'll scoot through this. So my job was to solve the Rubik's Cube internally, really. So things to consider was clearly electric vehicles, hydrogen, or is there room for both? Which energy choice? Would it be on-site charging, off-site charging, or fueling on road? AC, DC, CCS plug, pantograph. But we had to consider, and we were quite driven in our first large scale operation. We were quite driven by what the range of a vehicle would do. Clearly, we're a bus company. We know what mileages our vehicles do every day. But then, the effect of topography, clearly of our 64 depots, they're all different. Some are old, some are new, some are built, some are old tram sheds, for instance, which are over 100 years old. So it's what can we do with that depot ergonomics? And then we've got to think about how our people, how we operate, where we operate, everything from the engineer to the cleaner to the driver. We've got to think about all these things in this Rubik's Cube. Then we had the choice of vehicles, the type, the size, the weight, which manufacturer, and what the range is and what the future range is. Clearly over here in the UK, we have double deck buses. It's not really a common sight in Europe, but that's all got to be considered. Importantly, when we're modifying depots, we've got to consider business as usual. We did in the early days have some interesting conversation with civil engineering companies. Just presume we were just going to move off site. So pointing out that parking 200 vehicles, 200 buses on another site is kind of impossible. So we've got to really send the clear message out at every stage. Then we've got to consider our current employees, our future employees, and the effect on what this has on drivers, engineering, cleaners and things. Most importantly, we see a massive change in our ability to use software monitoring vehicles, and that's on and off vehicles. So all these things exist in some format, but I think what we found is we've got to develop them and work with partners to actually get the most out of them. So our story so far, so here's a few pictures of some vehicles in different cities across the UK. I'll start top left, so that's a hydrogen vehicle, and that's in Aberdeen. To the right, we have York, which are a British manufacturer called Optare, and they're a metro decker, again, double deck. In the middle is our largest site, which is Caledonia. To the bottom right is Leeds, and to the left is also Leeds, so it's Park and Ride in Leeds. So I spoke about piecemeal legacy. So in the past, we would just put enough vehicles into a location what we thought we needed and what we perhaps had funding for. So in York, we've got 33 vehicles, which are a mixture of single and double deckers. Leeds, again, we got 9 local services, 5 park and ride double deckers, and some small electric demand response transport vehicles. Some of these were funded through Green Fund Trust and Transforming City funding. And as you can see, at Aberdeen, we have 15 hydrogen double deckers, which we have in partnership with Aberdeen City Council. But these vehicles are fueled off-site at a location, a hydrogen production location at Kitty Brewster. So we actually have to drive the vehicles there to get fueled up. And there are currently 15 vehicles on site and 10 vehicles on order, which will be delivered soon. So our next steps, we've been working with the English government with DFT and the Scottish government for ScotZEBs. So we've just had confirmation that we've been successful in funding for 193 vehicles in 5 locations across England, starting at Leicester, where we're going to be putting 68 vehicles in, and that's pretty much 80% of the site. The bids there for York, Norwich, Leeds and Solent have now been confirmed, and in Scotland through Scottish Zero Emission Bus funding, we're going to be putting 24 vehicles into Aberdeen and 50 vehicles into Scotstoun, which is to the east of Glasgow. To start this journey, we had to build a TCO. So clearly we've got 5,000 vehicles. We know lots about diesel vehicles, when they go wrong, when they break, how much things are when they break, etc. What we didn't know is and I don't think anyone's got a clear picture because time's got to catch us up here, is the true cost of a diesel vehicle. So what there is here is work what we conducted with 4 vehicle manufacturers, and again, this, I need to be clear here that the numbers on this page relate to brand new components when they are failed at a rate what each manufacturer told us their expected life of the component would fail. So this excludes batteries. Anything what fails after year 8, or is predicted to fail after year 8, our accountants pull back to year 8, so they show it as a mid-life cost. So as you can see, the orange line is a diesel equivalent, and the blue line is an electric equivalent. And again, these things are a moving tail, and it's a bit fictional. And the reason it's a bit fictional is because all the components being brand new, in the diesel space today, we know that we can refurbish and recondition components, which that industry will grow in the next few years. So as that matures, the costs will come down. But there are things on here. A great example is compressors, an electric compressor versus a diesel engine compressor. So the diesel engine compressor is roughly £2,000 fitted. You usually fit one in its life. So in a total cost of ownership, you would add one compressor at £2,000. However, in an electric vehicle, we know that the compressor will probably fail 3 times, and the cost of that compressor could be up to £16,000 each. So building these things in, again, we won't know until this happens and we have a full life cycle, but that's how we've had to look at this. Maybe the operator, the vehicle manufacturers are kind of, if I want to call it, if you can see my hand over here, maybe this estimate's over here, and maybe the real answer's in the middle. So that's where we've got to work with. And we purely did this on electric vehicles, not hydrogen, because the information and the manufacturers around hydrogen are such smaller. I'm not going to go through everything here, but these are considerations what I would offer as advice to anyone getting into this journey. And anything highlighted is really probably a prime thing to look at, because lots of things in this journey you are not in control of. A good example is the domestic network operator, their timelines. We can't change that. We've got to consider how long things take to be delivered, how long it takes to dig a hole, to dig the cable, how long is the cable to dig. And some of these things you're not in control of. So you've got to kind of start and consider all these things, manufacturers struggling with parts, etc. Going into such things as costs. How are you going to pay for it? Is it CapEx? Is it OpEx? Have you got a grant? Where are you getting your energy from? How green is that? I'd look at not just vehicle warranties, but hardware warranties and timelines. Partnerships. We've grown some pretty good partnerships with DNOs, with vehicle chargers. And so we buy our charging equipment from Heliox, which are based in Holland. And we have a great partnership, which we are growing with Hitachi here in the UK. But just to be clear, we funding, we do our own funding, and finance, we do our own finance. But you've got to think of this. One thing we did decide really early on is that we were going to try and keep our vehicles similar, the procedure as similar as we could to what we do with diesel. So with diesel, we fill a vehicle up every day with diesel. It goes out, it does its day and comes back. It gets washed and it gets cleaned after it's been refueled, and there it goes again. So we've decided to go with a DC model, CCS plug, and we fill the vehicle full of electricity, akin to diesel, and we operate the vehicle just once in the day on its route. So it goes out and it comes back and it gets charged every night. One of the reasons we did that is we're looking at our cascade plan. So putting new vehicles into cities is fine, but then that new vehicle in that city, after a term, maybe 5, 6, 7 years, then goes to another city, and that vehicle is then a new vehicle in that city, but it's a bit older. So we've got to really think about how we move vehicles, how we cascade things. So our starting point was, again, DC, CCS, plugged rapid chargers, and that's what we're going to fit elsewhere. So we can then move the vehicle comfortably in time. I'm not going to go through this, but this is our biggest site, and it's the site we operate from COP26. But Caledonia is the largest bus garage in the UK, and we have a site capacity of 430 ICE vehicles with a current fleet of 320. It's interesting, and after this is just 2 slides and they're both photographs, and so I won't be here all day. But the site spans a motorway, so as motorway actually drives over the top, we have a tunnel to actually get to either side of it. I want to recognise Transport Scotland, their ambitions with funding They really drove first and made us work really hard to do things in a really short timescale. So the pictures you'll see in a second, I just need to be clear, this time last year, we hadn't put a spade in the ground on our site. That spade landed at the end of May, and by the middle of August, phase 1 was completed. And I sit here comfortable today knowing that phase 2 is completed today, actually. So actually that the timescales can be done, but it's the DNOs and it's that. We fitted in phase 1 11 dual header chargers for 22 buses. And in phase 2, we've got 126 buses going into phase 2. We're halfway through that journey of delivery. But in total, the site has 80 dual headed DC 150 kilowatt chargers. And to get power to site, we've had to come in 2 ways, but the current power supply is delivered to us on a temporary supply. And we've been working with SPEN, Scottish Power Energy Networks, who are the DNO, to actually help reinforce Glasgow's east side. So we're fitting a substation on site. We're going to take 1/3 of that energy. The other 2/3 will be used by SPEN. And on this journey, we worked with Ofgem and SPEN and got some more funding to do that, to prioritise it. As I said before, we work in partnership with Hitachi regarding things like smart software, charging as a service, battery as a service, and some other funky stuff. We're trying to work with the energy network as well. But just a word of caution, we've had to train over 1,000 drivers to drive these vehicles in a very short time. And we're currently working with engineers to develop them from stage 1, which is basic knowledge, to stage 4, which is a greater understanding and being able to technically work on the vehicles. So the next pictures are really clear here. So this is a picture. The big line in the middle is the M74. Again, as it points out there, phase 2 chargers. There was 11. We've upped that to 20 now. So the 20 chargers in that area. And we've got 63 chargers to the left-hand side. And we're also fitting some chargers, roof-mounted actually, dropping down in the engineering workshop. Again, Elliot's doing a great job with us there. So that is the picture. This is the reality. So this is completed. To the left-hand side, that's phase 1. So that currently charges 40 vehicles every night. And to the right-hand side, as you can see there, we've got the 63 chargers, and it is fitted out now. We're currently operating 80 vehicles currently, with a second tranche of vehicles to arrive very soon. So hopefully that was knowledgeable and it ticked a few boxes. So that's our journey so far. So I'll stop sharing.
Gary, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that. I mean, that was a massive overview, both on the organizational, infrastructural, and also the technical detail side. So I'm looking more than forward to come back to that. I suggest for now that we have the 3 presentations in a row and then start the discussion to kind of embark on everybody's contributions. So the next is Haley Liao, who's representing Shenzhen Bus Group, which has been globally a global pioneer for electrifying, I would like to say overnight, a whole city with depot charging technology. So Haley, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Arndt, and thank you, everyone. Very happy and honored to be here, sharing with everyone Shenzhen Bus's electrification experiences. Well, for those of you who have not been to Shenzhen, and we are a major city in southern China bordering Hong Kong, and we are known as being the tech hub and center in Asia, with tech companies headquartered here, such as BYD, Tencent, Huawei, etc., which I think is essential to how we were able to transform our bus technology and experiment the new technologies in the last 10 years. It's a huge city with 25 million population. So Shenzhen Bus Group is the biggest and oldest bus operator in the city. We run around 6,000 buses out of the 22,000 buses in Shenzhen, and we own about 5,000 taxis out of the 17,000 taxis here in Shenzhen. So, And this is about our company. We now operate around 100 charging stations, and we are in the process of opening up these charging stations to the general public to incentivize more publics to purchase EVs. And so far, I think it's been 10 years of journey of electrification since 2008. We now run we have been running on 100% pure EV public transportation since 2017. And starting from 2008, we have just retired our first batch of EV after 8 years of full life cycle in 2019. So we are in the process of purchasing another 800 buses right now. And when Arn said we change our buses overnight, I would say we changed majority of our buses from 2016 to 2018 in the process of 2 to 3 years, which is a very quick time span, essentially because of the subsidies regime that was provided by both the central government here in China and the local government, the Shenzhen government here. So what they did to encourage operators to switch to new energy buses is that they provide subsidies directly, not just to operators, but to participants in the entire ecosystem. So if you are a charger provider, if you're an infrastructure builder, and if you are a bus manufacturers, vehicle manufacturers, such as BYD here in Shenzhen, which is very close to us, you are entitled to claim some of these subsidies. And we together, because the technology was still very nascent back in the days in early 2010, so we work very closely with the manufacturers such as Yutong and BYD, and we gave them a lot of technical feedback on how to improve these buses, because in the early few years, the mileage, at most, it was only be able to sustain around 150, 160 kilometers per day, which is not enough for a full day operations. But right now, I think we were able to test out new charging infrastructure where our charger to bus ratio is 1:4. And we are building these new multi-story charging depots for both taxis and buses for multifunctional usages and commercial usage for the drivers and for our vehicle users. We also have a centralized dynamic charging. We charge most of our cars at night, taking advantage of the cheap electricity prices and the low grid demand at night. So the electricity price here in Shenzhen at night is actually 1/4 of the price during the day. And we are also currently in the process of really developing our own energy storage services, where we use the retired bus batteries and then we convert them into the energy storage service here down on the left. So in that way, we can recycle a lot of the batteries that are now going into retirement. Let's peek. And with our taxi depot, comparing to the diesel buses that we used to, diesel taxis that we used to operate, they were loud and much dirtier than the EV charging infrastructure that we have now. So we've actually come up with schemes where we convert them into multi-story rest areas for drivers, because they will have 2 to 3 hours spare time at noon, which is when they usually charge their taxis, to rest, canteen, dine out, and work out in the gym. And then there's cafes, and there's even hair salon where they can get their essential services completed here, and to take and not to waste the time on waiting for charging. So we see this as a good business model that we can replicate in other areas, not just in Shenzhen, but I think in other parts of the world where we're thinking of electrification as well. And for the international work that I have been in charge with, last year we actually published a report with the World Bank to document, the last 10 years of challenges and journeys and all of the lessons learned of operating these, 6,000 buses and 5,000 taxis as the first-hand experiment. And we also worked very closely with UITP to produce standards and the toolkits where how to maintain and also operate the electric taxis here. And we also work very closely with governments internationally, working with the UAE, Singapore LTA, on advising multi-story electric bus depot design, and also on the top-down design of their electrification agendas. So I think for us, it's really been such a long journey to get here. And I think there are a lot of challenges that we can share, and hopefully that this would be helpful. And this is just a short introduction on Shenzhen Bus Group, and very happy to answer any questions that you guys would have later. All right, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Haley, fabulous. And I'm sure we'll have lots of questions to come back later in the discussion. Matthias Jangel, who will be speaking next, is the Chief Strategy Officer of Budapest Transport Company, BKV. So we're jumping back to Europe. And then we'll have three, not data points, but three different philosophies and insights, which I'm sure will provide a good background for the Q&A that will start afterwards. So Matthias, the floor is yours.
Hi, Matthias, I think you're on mute, I'm afraid.
Right. Matthias, we don't hear you yet.
Okay.
Now that looks better. Here we go.
Sorry. So it seems the BKV is the smallest operator today in this group, and I hope we'll follow my colleagues' suit in this way to decarbonize public transport. So I'd like to introduce briefly the Hungarian situation about buses. In Hungary, there are about 207,000 urban buses in this area. From this among, we have about 100 electric-powered buses and about 150 CNG-powered buses. For national coach company, there are also 4,700 buses, from which about 100 CNG powered, and there are 10,000 buses for private operators and freelancers. These buses out from public service. 2 years ago, began a program for demonstrate the advantages electro-powered buses in Hungary, and we have about 100 buses in the countryside and surround of Budapest from different suppliers, and we have reduced the carbon dioxide emission through these buses and these operation systems. It's very good results. And what is about the pollution in Budapest? The transportation is responsible of the pollution up to 20%, air pollution in Budapest. and emit greenhouse gases about 20%, and only 2.5% from the public transport. So how can we reduce this impact? There are 3 ways for us. The first one, we can power the modal share the using public transportation. We have provided a very smart and modal service for customers. The second is we have to modernize bus fleet, and we have to use more metro cars or light rails. And the third is public transport operator is an industrial company. We have workshops, depots. We have reduced our emission too in these fleets. So in Budapest, we have 1.6 billion journeys a year in public transportation, and the modal share is not bad. And last year, the public transportation took for 47%, and the individual car transport 35%. It means that there are about 4 million journeys a day by public transport, and a little bit less with private transportation. In point of view of the emission by private car, each kilometer produce 107 gram carbon dioxide. It's a little bit less with diesel buses, and more efficient if we use electro bus or underground and light rail too. So if we can reduce the emission, we can reduce the number of journeys with traditional cars. We can reduce the pollution. It's a big issue for the cities. We have experiences in operation of trolleybuses since 1933, and now we operate in 143 trolleybuses too. 60% of them is battery-powered trolleybuses are able to ride without catenary systems about 5 and 10 kilometers for each journeys. And in Budapest, we use 1,500 buses. We have only 20 electric powered buses in the city, this midi-size, and there are brand new 40 electric buses for the suburban traffic. So it is, and at BKV we operate also hybrid buses. We don't have only success experiences with them, and the CNG buses is a success story in Budapest and the other cities in Hungary too. So how can we improve our fleet or change our fleet? If we see the capex of different tractions, we can see that if the diesel traction cost 100%, the CNG is a little bit more expensive, and e-buses more than 2 times more expensive than diesel buses. There's a program in Hungary supported by Hungarian state from the European Commission's subsidies, and we can reduce this cost up to 50–60% with this grant. So it's a very attractive system for Hungarian cities. Unfortunately, Budapest can apply these grants. So, and we counted also the total cost ownership, different types of vehicles, and without subsidies, the electric buses with only depot charging is 40% more expensive than diesel buses. But if we can get some subsidy, we can reduce this cost. So from point of view of operators, it's an economical question to change our fleet in Hungary. So it is the Green Bus program for us. So there are about 180 billion Hungarian forint. It means 400 million euro for this project, and the Hungarian state wants to change 1,200 diesel buses to electro car. It means that about 40–45% of all fleet of Hungarian cities, and we can reduce 75,000 tons of carbon dioxide. We modernized also depots, and we can use solar panels for charging. It means that 40% of demand electrobuses we can charge by solar energy. What some words about COVID? The number of passengers of public transportation reduced this period up to 40–50%, and it increased only up to 70% by end of 2021, and it's less many passengers, and the individual car traffic stayed at the same level before the pandemic time. So it's a big challenge for public transportation. What can we do now in Budapest without support from the government? From the same budget, we can change two old diesel buses to modern Euro 6 norm diesel buses, and we can less the emission, or we can buy only one electro bus, and the pollution we can reduce only up to 50%. So it's a big challenge from the local authority. So what is the better solution this time? And the third part is public transport company as an industry in the depots. We could refurbish the infrastructure, metro and light rails, and depot heating system, lighting system. We can use solar panels and solar collectors, so our company could reduce carbon dioxide emission to years by year. This is the samples with solar panels and solar collectors in depots. So there are these three-way to reduce carbohydrate emission. So thank you very much.
Matthias, fabulous. Thanks a lot for this tour d'horizon that you gave us, especially also with the numbers. And that brings me to one of the key points. What parts of this knowledge are transferable, and under which conditions? I mean, it's a kind of a good layout that we have from the three different things. And maybe I'd suggest that we maybe start with the depot aspects. Gary showed very much how clumsy it can be to having to deal with legacy infrastructure that you inherit. Haley showed if you can do something from scratch, how you can integrate it literally speaking, virtually integrate the economics of production between electrified modes. And Matthias also showed that if you do have a workforce that is already trained and is knowledgeable about electric modes, because you run trolley buses, because you run rail, because you run an underground, that might give you also a head start. So this specific aspects is one of the first things that operators out there have to deal with. Maybe let's focus a bit on that depot and infrastructure side. What is the transferability of those strategies? Gary, maybe if you're comfortable with that, just a few remarks on that from your point of view and from what we just heard from everybody.
Yeah, so our view was to really concentrate on what we were doing in Caledonia, which is the site I showed you, to then learn and then use our learnings to then quickly be able to transfer the learnings elsewhere with the partners we've worked with. So we're all used to what we're doing. Perhaps the next one looks a little different because of the learnings. But yeah, so the learnings were always designed to be the pathfinder, so we could replicate at speed quickly. So yeah, that's our vision.
So there would be a self-fueling virtuous circle that you're building there in terms of knowledge that you first deploy internally, and the more knowledge you have, then you can transfer it to other sites and maybe even externally. Haley, what's your point of view there?
Could you repeat the question there?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, what you mentioned with the dealing with legacy infrastructure and deciding what to build new, what to keep. I mean, China is very good, if I may say so, at also building new things and innovating extremely rapidly. So if you got the chance to build something from scratch, as you showed, probably that is a huge advantage. Also in terms of financing, you mentioned the subsidies by the canton government and other sides. So how do you make this knowledge transferable? You spoke about knowledge that you developed in this UITP co-edited paper that would be also transferable both on the taxi and on the bus side to other sides of the world. What's your take on that? If, for example, you go to a place where you couldn't build fancy infrastructure like that, which part of the knowledge is transferable and which part would be require more local innovation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think China's case is very specific because we have a completely different system here where that is very much top-down, providing finance, infrastructure building, and that is not the case with many of the other countries. So I think when we go to other countries, we get to be more creative on particularly on the financing side, especially with electrification and new energy testing. This is high capex. So we work with a lot of the international organizations like and NGOs like World Bank, development banks, which we help them to figure out how much cost in the specific countries. So in our recent cases in Malaysia and Philippines, where based on their country's financial model, how much money would make sense for these banks to provide. And I think as these are on the forefront of many countries' agenda, I think even not just with development banks, even with grid companies. So a lot of the partnerships with the grid companies are happening in Latin America. Well, and also I think earlier I heard with Hitachi and the grid partnerships here in the UK as well. So I think we just have to think outside of the box and to look outside of the government for the support and funding when we go outside of China.
Right, thanks a lot. Matthias, you mentioned also the synergies that are there between different modes and that also help you a little bit on the CapEx side to approach the battery bus deployment, if I may say so, within the infrastructure. What is your take on dealing with the legacy that you have and projecting that into the future? How did you decide where to deploy the first battery electric buses? How were those decisions made in the back? You mentioned some suburban operations, for example.
We at BKW wanted to change our bus fleet because we have over 500 buses under Euro 3 norm. So, and we think that by 2030, we can finish, we have been finished buying diesel buses and using diesel buses. Point of view of energy, in Hungary, we don't have enough energy for electromobility. For example, the Metro Budapest needs energy like small city with 100,000 inhabitants. The light rail, the same among, and the bus need is the same level for all 100,000 to 300 buses. So in Hungary, we need to electric network refurbished and also capacity to build.
Okay, so that right.
If we had a lot of money and we wanted to change during 2 years all fleet, it would be good, but we won't be enough energy.
Well, that's what I guess what Gary also mentioned with things that are beyond control and factors that do in. Also, what emerges now is the huge role of subsidizing schemes or the support of local policies. Haley also mentioned this feedback loop initially 2016 to 2018 between the manufacturers, BYD and Yutong, to optimize their product and get direct feedback from a large scale test with a couple of thousand vehicles, which is not a small pilot that we see elsewhere. So I guess there's quite some takeaways for innovation. Now, if we look at the vehicle side, I mean, things are getting a bit better, but we all know that, for example, in Philadelphia, there have been issues with cracked frames on buses, on battery buses. Haley mentioned that the first generation lived something like 6 to 8 years, if I got that correctly, and then the batteries could be recycled and converted to energy storage. On the other hand, we've got things like trolley buses here in Switzerland. The first, and they are not IMC yet, but the first generation, they live up to 22 years in revenue service. The first low floor generation, extremely sturdy vehicles, and light rail vehicles that live up to 40 years. So we've got totally different timescales here, also in needs of investment. And once that you've got low floor and accessibility rules implemented in your system, then you're also free to keep the vehicles a little longer, because you don't, and not the problem that Matthias mentioned with the turnover, getting away from Euro 2, Euro 3 fleets. What is your take on the longevity of vehicles, Gary? What is your calculations there? What's the framework that you are dealing with, or if you're also dealing with the local authorities that contract the networks out to you?
So actually, we don't work in the franchise model, which is where the authorities, ours is pay over the till, really. So for that, we expect a vehicle life to be 16 years. We are hoping that's a diesel vehicle, so we depreciate over a diesel vehicle would depreciate over 15 years, whether it be a single or a double. An EV, we're looking at 16 years. But hopefully, next generation vehicles, we can get a life akin to what you mentioned, more at 20. And we are seeing manufacturers appear, which have probably got a different way of building a bus. So the predominant way of building a bus here in the UK is an EV or a diesel bus. The bus is the same, and they just put the other components. The running gear disappears, the diesel running gear, and the electric running gear goes in the space. We are seeing some skateboard platform companies, so such as Arrival here in the UK, and there are others in Europe as well. So eBus, and they are, they're going to be lighter weight and hopefully, made of different components, different composites, etc., which should give us that lifespan. So we do hope and we do feel that 20 years should be the next norm. And I don't see why not, actually. So
that's moving away from the conversion design and just changing the drivetrain. That would allow for more sophisticated, which is something that we do see happen in the industry. Haley, you're already at the third generation or something, if I'm calculating correctly, and I see Yutong and BYD, especially Yutong, also are doing fantastic, both in the opportunity charging fully battery electric and also the trolley bus, the in-motion charging trolley bus markets, globally exporting vehicles up to Mexico and elsewhere. So how is your experience with this latest generation? You mentioned getting beyond 160 kilometers of range of the first gen buses and into something like, you mentioned, I think 250, 300, which is in Shenzhen with the air conditioning on full throttle in summer, or the heating in winter, can be quite a challenge probably.
Yeah, I think we're on to the third generation right now. In the first batches, I think 120, 130 would be amazing already, but normally they don't last that long. Particularly Shenzhen is a very hot city in the summer. And then I think in the second generation, I think 160 to 180 kilometers mileage, pretty comfortable doing that. And then right now, I think some of the buses can go up to 200. But here we only do 8 years life cycle, particularly because Yutong and BYD export different type of bus models internationally than in China. I think their bus models here are actually cheaper, much cheaper actually. So you guys get better buses there for sure. And I think for us, the 8 years lifespan makes sense. It was pretty much the same lifespan that we have for our diesel buses that were retired as well. So I think right now we're looking into smaller buses. A lot of the K8, K10 bus models were the ones that we use predominantly, and we want to.
That would be 8 to 10 meters, the shortest standard buses.
Yeah. So now if you come to Shenzhen, Arn, if you come here, you actually see pretty different than when you came like 3 years ago. Now it's all these like small microbuses that are running on the road right now, because we wanted to have bus operators to become sort of the supplementary role for the metro system here, and to pick up people from the major transport hubs to office areas and residential areas, so that we can, really ultimately decrease the use for reliance on private vehicles here.
So what we see there is also what Matthias mentioned in Budapest, that you have a tiering strategy where you've got the metro and the light rail for the big load, and then you break. It's what we do here in Zurich, where the trams and the regional railways carry the bulk of the load, and then the fine distribution, the tangential one, which is not served by the radial rail system, is being high capacity trolley buses with in-motion chargers that, as Matthias mentioned, it can go 20 kilometers of wire also and back. Extremely productive tool. But also, as Haley mentioned, it's a different price tag. I mean, they are made in Switzerland, so it's super advanced bus, but the price tag is certainly different. Yes,
we probably can't afford it here.
What's interesting is then, well, I mean, Shanghai has a fantastic BRT also at Beijing, but I guess it's the force of China to raise different strategies at the same time and look what works best where. But I think this one size fits all, and I think this is the major takeaway here, also from what Matthias says. That's no longer, that goes out the door with the diesel bus. It is no longer, I mean, again, China is a bit of a special case, especially Shenzhen, but a great testing ground. But then again, you want to learn, and we all on the operating side, I think, need to learn very fast now which product goes best where in terms of also of operating costs. In the US, for example, you've got this traditional issue. It's very easy to get capex. If you talk about OPEX as an operator, as a PTA, then things can get very clumsy and very political very quickly. So that is something you want to consider. And for example, a charger or an overhead wire for a trolley bus that you could write off over 40 years, then all of a sudden the economics look differently, especially if you don't need any complicated wiring structures and switches and all these kind of things, or for the opportunity chargers, if you don't need them at every third stop. So, but you can do longer distances. So I guess we are just at the beginning of the cycle here, and it's learnings on all fronts. What you mentioned, Heidi, is that also the energy price in Shenzhen, that was a fourth at night of what it is during the day, and also the incentive by the government to stabilize the electricity grid by transferring the demand into the night hours. That was a substantial, together with the subsidies, was a substantial motivation for you to build this fully battery bus system. And Matthias mentioned that basically to electrify the bus seat is another 100,000 inhabitants town worth of electricity, one being the metro, one being the light rail system and the trolley buses, and the third now being the battery buses. So that what do we expect from governments? What's the support? Where are the bottlenecks? Matthias said if we could do this, if we were in China, where it's all top down, and obviously once it's implemented, I mean, once it's decided, the implementation is very quick. But what would be, from the European perspective, Gary and Matthias, what would be most helpful from the government side to help with that?
If I go first, so I think we're slightly behind the curve here in the UK. However, action is being taken now, and grants, the grants to excite this are live and here. It's just often lots of, and not just my bus depots, but other companies' bus depots. It's a postcode lottery of where the power is and where you are. So I like the way Haley's looking at things as hubs and them kind of solutions. Yeah, and there is lots of that going on. There's lots of innovation by local governments here and by national government to form these hubs, whether they're hydrogen, electric, whatever. So we are behind the curve, but I think that we are seeing good relevant grants to expedite that, and it's very welcome. So it's just how we can combine lots of things to meet the right answer. That's got to be the one. So
formidable. Matthias, a final remark?
So I think we need some support from the government, and not only for the transport operators, but for energy industry too, and to develop energy storages, for example, and recycling batteries. It's a very good thing, and the innovative technologies could help to improve all traction systems of public transport. And I hope by 2030 we have been achieve these results, and we can change up to 50-60% of bus fleet to electric buses.
Right. So with the diesel bus out the door goes also the silo thinking. Transportation management and energy management in urban and also in rural regions become one. We need to talk to each other much more than we did in the past. With regard to the clock, I'll give it back to the editors at some point and just mention that all of you in the audience, you're more than welcome to reach out to all of us if you've got questions. And I guess that at the latest in November in London, we'll continue this dialogue, which is, as was mentioned repeatedly, we are just at the starting point. And this is an exciting journey to be on. Thank you very much for being here. Thanks again to our panelists for these wonderful contributions, and see you soon and speak soon. Back to the editors, Leah.
Lovely. Oh, lovely. Thank you so much, Arnd. Unfortunately, that is all that we have time for, but thank you so much to Hallie, Matthias, Gary and Arnd for your time today, for your fantastic presentations and brilliant discussion. And thank you to our audience for joining us as well. Up next, we have our first case study of the day, during which we will be joined by Cognify's Ron Grimfield as he discusses how to improve incident response in rail and mass transit. Then at midday, speakers from Tier Mobility, Super Pedestrian, Lime and Bird will be joining us for our second panel discussion to discuss the challenges that micromobility operators continue to face as they increase their levels of operation and integration into daily life. And we hope to see you there. Otherwise, thank you once again so much to all of our speakers and our moderator, and goodbye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.